Om Namo Narayanaya. Welcome everyone to today's Yuva Chat. My name is Vidya and I am one of the members of Yuvathma and have the privilege of being your host for today's session. For those of you who may not be aware, Yuvathma is the youth wing of the Gurudwaran Temple of Brampton. The wing is led by Hindu youth and aims to bring together the younger members of the community through engaging events. Today, I am proud to present another Yuvathma initiative called Yuva Chats, which are spiritual talks for the young mind by various eminent speakers. Yuvathma plans to have more Yuva Chats in the upcoming months, where we would bring in different authors and speakers to share their ideas with us. I would highly encourage all of you to check out our Facebook and Instagram handle for more information. Our speaker for today's Yuva Chat is none other than Mr. Nikunj Trivedi, who will be talking to us about the very interesting topic of the contributions of Hindus to the human civilization. Mr. Nikunj Trivedi is the president of CoHNA, a grassroots Hindu advocacy organization promoting a better understanding of Hinduism and India in North America. He also serves as the chairman of the Hindu Students Council, the largest pan-Hindu youth organization in North America. Nikunjji has been passionate about advocacy, community organizing, and youth engagement for the past 2 decades, and enjoys presenting on Hindu history, symbolism, and socio-cultural issues. He has been invited as a speaker and a panelist on various national and international conferences. He currently lives in New Jersey with his family and works in New York in the financial services industry. Nikunjji, thank you so much for coming out today. We're so excited to have you present to us. Just a quick note for our audience before we begin the talk. We do have some housekeeping information. Throughout the talk, please do keep your mics on mute and your videos turned off in order to avoid any disruptions. I can see we're doing a great job already, so let's keep that up. Also, if you have any questions at all throughout the chat, please do use the Zoom function and we would be more than happy to address them at the Q&A session. If we do reach capacity on Zoom, please note that we are also broadcasting live on our Facebook channel, GTOB Live. So without further ado, I will now pass on the mic to Nikunjji. Please take it from here.
Great. Thank you. Namaste for the wonderful introduction. As you had mentioned, my journey started a little over 2 decades ago when I was in college. And a lot of questions came to me about who am I as a Hindu? What am I really about? What is my identity? Why should I care about all these things? And as I started to learn more and more about the great culture of ours, the Hindu tradition, and the contributions of it throughout the years, it became like part of me. And I realized that this is something that I really want to contribute back to. And that's why I started to volunteer with the Hindu Students Council. And for the last 2 decades, I've been involved in that. It's the largest Hindu youth organization in North America. So anyone who's a student, whether you're in high school or in college, we would encourage you to join us. You can check it out at hindustudentscouncil.org. Throughout my journey, I've learned so much about the wonderful contributions that our ancestors have made. So I decided that, rather than just learning about it, why don't I share it with people? So I've created multiple presentations about it. So today's presentation is going to focus on the wonderful contributions, the influence of Hindus around the neighbors of India, such as Japan, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, different places, Southeast Asia in general. So we'll focus on that and we'll talk about some of the great contributions that our ancestors have made to human civilization to make it better and to make this world a better place. So let me start sharing my screen. Let's see. Let's make sure. Can you guys see my screen now?
Looks good.
Okay, great. But first, we're going to do a little bit of a quiz. So some of you had volunteered. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions quickly. Let's see if that works. Where was the earliest dockyard of the world located? If anybody knows. Okay, so the answer to that is at Lothal, which is a Harappan acropolis in Gujarat. I'm from Gujarat and I've been there. It's a wonderful location. Many people think about ruins around the world, but nobody thinks about the earliest dockyard of the world that is actually located in Gujarat. Where was zinc first manufactured by the distillation process? The answer to that is the first distillation of pure zinc was carried out at the Zawar mines in Rajasthan in the 12th century AD. Remember, this is 12th century AD, about almost 900 years ago. Which civilization of the world had the earliest planned layout of the cities? Any takers on that one? This one is fairly easy, so anybody wants to chime in? This one was the Indus civilization was the first to lay out its planned towns of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Kalimangan. Which famous ancient Indian scientist theorized that the earth is round in the 5th century? Many people should be able to know this, but if not, any guessers? The answer is Aryabhatta. He compared the earth to a kadamba flower, as explained in the following quotes. Gola 6 of his work says, the globe of the earth stands without support in space at the center of the celestial sphere. The earth is circular on all sides. Just as the bulb of a kadamba flower is surrounded by blossoms on all sides, so also is the globe of the earth surrounded by all creatures, whether living on land or in water. Finally, which is the largest poem in the world, bigger than both the Iliad and the Odyssey combined?
Mahabharata.
Ah, yes. Yes, that is correct. The Mahabharata, together with its appendix, which is known as the Harivamsha, it is 100,000 verses long. So this just gives you a little glimpse of the type of contributions that our ancestors have made within the world civilization, which a lot of people, unfortunately don't tend to know, but that's our objective today. But first, some quick facts about Hindus. Many people think Hindus are only in India. Hindus currently are 13.5% and growing of the world's population. Hindu Dharma is the 3rd largest religion in the world. I don't like to use the word Hinduism, so you may see me using the word Hindu Dharma. It's the 3rd largest religion in the world. Hindus have flourished in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, many other countries. Around 110 countries, which is almost all corners of the world, from Canada to Argentina to Russia to Australia. Rig Veda is the oldest known book to mankind. And again, book is written down. It's much, much older than that through the oral tradition. And as we said, the Mahabharata is considered the largest epic in the world, bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. Hindus have, of course, given to the world yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, mathematics, the musical arts in many ways, martial arts, and so many amazing things, which some of them will cover today. But first, I wanted to talk about some of the influences that Hindus have had. Hindus have never aggressively gone and proselytized anywhere or converted or any kind of violence in that sense from a civilizational perspective. A lot of our influence has been through ambassadors, through peaceful negotiations, through just merchants and traders and many types of agents of influence, as well as Buddhist monks who have taken both Hindu and Buddhist traditions around the world. So first one I wanted to talk about quickly is Cambodia or Cambodia. The origins or the influence of Hindu thought process can be traced back as far as 100 BC at the Funan kingdom there. It was the home of the Khmer kingdom, which is one of the largest kingdoms in Cambodia. Many people may have heard of this temple called the Angkor Wat. The Angkor Wat is the largest temple built, I believe, around 11th century AD, dedicated to Bhagavan Vishnu. It became a Hindu-Buddhist temple as times went by, but originally King Suryavarman built this temple in dedication of to Bhagavan Vishnu. The entire temple and the complex is about 30 miles wide, which is larger than the city of London, and I believe New York City as well, or close to New York City. So it's gigantic, the complex itself, but the temple is considered to be laid out in the Hindu concept of the world, the mandalas and the, so the Meru mountain in the center of the world and things like that. The entire mandir has various carvings of Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Vedas, so many different aspects. And of course, as I mentioned, the word Cambodia comes from Cambodia or Kampuchea, which is derived from the Sanskrit word Cambodia. So you can see here some of the carvings. At the bottom, you'll see this multi-faced deity or figure They say that this represents the, the sort of the four directions, or the king itself, the King Suryavarman or his ancestors. You can notice a sort of like a Buddhist and the Buddhist sort of Gautam Buddha right in the middle. This was a recent addition. Before that, there's also Vishnu and other things as well. So I highly recommend everybody to visit Cambodia. On the left side, you can also see the Ramayana being played out. It's at Rimkar, is called, Ramayana is called Rimkar. So there are so many people there whose names are also connected to Ramayana and Mahabharata and stuff like that. So this is really, really interesting. And again, I want to try to give a glimpse today of the types of things that have happened as far as Hindus. So given the time that we have. Sorry. Oh, yep, here we go. So my apologies. Come back to Cambodia. So if you look at Angkor Wat just itself, as I told you guys before, it's 4 times the size of the Vatican City. In recent past, they used a technology called LiDAR, which is a laser technology, to show that this temple complex, as you can see at the bottom, that's the LiDAR technology, and that's growing, by the way. It shows that it's as big as New York City and London, like I mentioned before. Even today, many people think it's a dead temple, but it's not really completely dead temple. It's a tourist site, no doubt, but there's still Hindu and Buddhist ceremonies that are continuing there. Even though Buddha Dharma is the main religion of Cambodia, which came later, the idea is that Hindus there have never, the local people have never seen a conflict between Hindus and Buddhists. Yes, kings had their own conflicts, but the local people still continue to have a blend of Hindu-Buddhist traditions. Let's talk about Indonesia. A lot of people may know that Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, but what many people don't know is the amount of influence that it has from a Hindu thought process. Not just the island of Bali, by the way. Many people think, oh, all Hindus are in Bali only. But no, if you look at the entire Indonesia, the entire country, you will see some very cool things. So they believe that the entire culture, the Hindu culture, was brought there by Sage Agastya. There were 2 major kingdoms there, Srivijaya and Shailendra. They were in the island of Java and Sumatra. They were very influential. Some of the temples that you may know there, they are the UNESCO World Heritage Site, built around 7th or 8th century AD, are called Prambanan temples. And we'll see something in a little bit as well. This is dedicated to Bhagavan Shiva as the main deity, but then there's of course the 3 Murtis, Brahmaji and Bhagavan Vishnu, both are also there. The other islands of sort of Indonesia, that are Bali and other different types of islands, had their own influences. Not just the locals, but the Chola kingdom, actually the kings from the Chola and Pandya, various dynasties traveled to Indonesia and Southeast Asia on various expeditions. Some were conquering expeditions, others were trade expeditions. Of course, many people know that Bali, the famous island of Bali, is the oldest place outside of India where Hinduism continues, or Hindu Dharma continues to be practiced today. What's really interesting to know is many people in Indonesia, even though they're Muslims, they have various Hindu names, okay? And the actual language of Indonesia is called Bahasa Indonesia, which is derived from the Sanskrit word bhasha. And you can see the notes. So some cool pictures you want to see here. I'd mentioned to you on the Prambanan temple at the bottom right side, you see the 3 pillars. That's the Prambanan temple. In there, there's the Durga Devi on the right side. The white Murti is Devi Saraswati in Bali. There's so many really amazing Murtis like that in Bali. You can also see this carving in the Prambanan temple of Ravan kidnapping Sita while Jatayu is fighting him. It's a famous story from Ramayana. You can see the official airlines of Indonesia, and this doesn't even happen in India. The official airlines of Indonesia is known as Garuda Airlines, Garuda being the vehicle of Bhagavan Vishnu. And of course, here, if you look at this rupiah, the Indonesian bill, first of all, it's called rupiah. But what's really interesting is at the top left side, you see Garuda. In the middle, you see Ganesha. So you can see it, actual official currency, official airlines of Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, still has that connection to the Hindu traditions. And the Indonesians, local Indonesians, are very proud of it. So there's no conflict as far as like the whole idea of, oh, this one religion versus another religion. So that's really amazing thing that I found about Indonesia. Then let's talk about a few more things that I want to show you guys. As I mentioned to you, very recently in the Prambanan temple, a puja was performed. And if you look at the dressings and the local, this is done by the local people. There were pujaris who came from India as well as other parts of Indonesia. But the ceremony was conducted by the locals. After 1100 years, that was conducted. You can also look in the left side. You can see a Ramayana being performed. It's called Gamelan. That's usually the name of the Ramayana, sort of play that's being performed. It's in the island of Bali, but also in other places you can find. And at the bottom, you can see really cool pictures from the island of Bali. Here's a fight between Karna and Arjuna. You can see on the right side. Very cool stuff. If you go to the island of Bali, you'll find this steeped in the Hindu tradition. Let's talk about Thailand. So even Thailand, if you go to the airport, on the right side, top right side, the island's airport is called Suvarna Bhumi, which means the golden land in Sanskrit, the actual airport. In the airport, they have a scene from the famous Samudra Manthan story, where the Devas and the Asuras are fighting out for the divine nectar and other things. So this is actually at the Thailand temple. Notice that the Buddhist monks are also standing and taking pictures in front of that. So, many times people feel like Hinduism and Buddhism are different, but they're quite connected together. On the left side, you can see various shrines of Ganesha and Brahma in Bangkok and Chiang Mai. You have a Ganesh shrine, central Bangkok, big golden statue. You have a dancing Ganesha in Chiang Mai. You also have the Muruti of Brahma in Bangkok. Brahma, as many of you may know or may not know, is not typically worshipped in India, but what you'll find this is outside of India, in Thailand, Indonesia, even in Japan, you find statues of Brahmaji in different places. So again, the whole idea is a lot of influence in Thailand. You find that Thai kings even today are coronated by Brahmins that come from India. So there's a whole lot of connections between Thailand and India in many different ways. Huge influence of the Tamil heritage in Thailand. So it's very, very important to understand that. And you'll find that more and more, the names, the script look very similar. The older capital actually of Thailand used to be called Ayutthaya. And you can guess where the name comes from Ayodhya. So you can see that there is a strong connection, especially to Ramayana and some of the Hindu tradition, Hindu epics, things like that in Thailand. You can see here again, Ramayana. This is a painting called from a Thai version of Ramayana. Look at the figures; they're very sort of like traditional Thai figures. You have the, you have the what do you call the Ramayana called Ramakian. You also have the Mariamman temple in Bangkok, Thailand. The very traditional and old temple. Let's talk about Vietnam. Many people may know about Thailand, Indonesia, etc., but they don't know about Vietnam. So the Cham people actually were the followers of Shiva. A lot of the influence there is on Bhagwan Shiva. You see like the different influences of Shiva and Vishnu in different places, but within the Vietnamese community, this worship was very dominant until 14th century. And the Champa civilization, which is the main civilization, the Hindu civilization in Vietnam, flourished all the way from 6th century AD to 15th century. This is a really long time, like 900 or 1,000 years basically. So they actually believe that when they die, Nandi, which is Shiva's bull, Shiva's vehicle, comes to take their Atma to the Holy Land back to India. Amazing. Holy Land back to India. What is really interesting that I found was there is a lot of connection to the Nagas, or the serpent-like beings that are talked about in the Hindu tradition. So the Cham people are very much connected to these Nagas, and I'll show you some pictures in a bit. But some of the names, if you look at this, if you look at in Vietnam, some of the names were Amravati, Vijaya, Indrapura, Kauthra, Panduranga. These are actual names of cities that were inhabited by the Vietnamese people or the civilizations that were influenced by the Hindu thought process. So here you see on the left side, you see the Shiva Lingam. At the bottom, you have wedding of Sita and Rama carved at the bottom of the Shiva Lingam. On the left side bottom, you see the Shiva being worshipped by different Nagas. So this is, you can find this in different places. On the right side top, you see a sculpture of Shiva at the same museum, the Vietnamese museum. In fact, the president of India, Mr. Kovind, had gone to this Vietnamese exhibition to sort of recognize the contributions of Hindus or the Indian culture to Vietnam and vice versa. And then finally, Ganesha at 7th century AD. As I had mentioned, the whole civilization from 6th century AD all the way to 15th century AD. Have you ever seen Japan? If you have seen Japan, you may not realize that Hindu deities actually are popular in Japan. In fact, many people actually say that the entire Japanese Shinto tradition has been inspired by the Hindu Buddhist thought process and deities. Okay, so it goes back all the way to 6th century when you have Buddhist monks traveling from India to Japan, India to China to Japan, actually took Hindu deities with them. And this is really cool for me. I always used to think that, oh, Hindu Dharma and Buddha Dharma were very separate, but in fact, that's not true. What you also see is that in the left side, you see 3 different pictures. So you see Ganesha, which is very obviously very obvious. What you don't see on the left side is Benzaitan, which is the Hindu equivalent known as Saraswati. So the Sanskrit name, of course, Saraswati, but the Japanese name is Benzaitan. Ganesha's Japanese name is Kankiten, and then Kubera on the right side is known as Bishamonten. He is these are the Daishoin temple in, I believe, in Tokyo, if I'm not mistaken, or outside of Tokyo. One of the really cool things I found was that one of the suburban districts in Tokyo is named after Lakshmiji, or it traces the roots back to Lakshmiji. So again, as I mentioned to you, Lakshmiji and other Hindu deities were taken from India to China and then eventually to Japan. Japanese couples who actually want to have a desire to have a beautiful daughter pray to Goddess Saraswati even today. Okay, so I'll show you some pictures of Saraswati. Is considered to be the patroness of writers and painters in Japan. You can also find sort of influence of Ramayana in parts of Mahabharata, but really Ramayana in traditional Japanese dance of Bugaku and Gigaku. And here's the former Japanese ambassador to India. He said a majority of Japanese gods are actually Indian gods. Here it is. So in Japan, you see there's a big statue of Benzaitan, who's, like I said, Saraswati. Then there is Kichijoten, which is who is Lakshmi. On the top right side, most people, if you've attended temple ceremonies, you've seen a homam or a havan ceremony happening. Look at this ceremony. Okay, if you look at this picture carefully, you will realize that this is what they call in Japan. They call it goma, which is a havan ceremony. But you know where the word goma comes from? It comes from homa. So this is at the Takahata Fudo temple in Japan. And here's a temple called a Hozanji, which has a Buddhist temple, but has Ganesha in there. Okay, so you can see the influence of Hindu Buddhist thought process in Japan. I have a video here, but I can't play it for now. But there's actually, if you just go to YouTube and type in Goma ceremony at the Takahata Fudo temple, you will see this actually playing out. By the way, just a weird thing. This guy looks like the Dalai Lama in a way. I thought that was funny. Anyways, so moving on. China. Many people know that China has a lot of Buddhist influence, but Chinese actually held a deep respect for Hindu Dharma and India. Many ancient Chinese scholars traveled all the way from China on foot to come to India. They were not guaranteed, by the way, any admission. Okay, they thought that, oh, maybe we'll get admission, we may not get admission, etc. But there is evidence of Hinduism that has influenced a lot of Chola influence, specifically in Guangzhou and through the Tamil traders around the sort of the Song and the Yuan dynasty, which around, like, let's say 960 AD to 1279, and the Yuan dynasty from 1279 to 1368 AD. You can see various types of caves. So this on the left side, you can see Magao caves. In those caves, you can find Hindu deities and like sort of nice architecture and things like that. Here's some additional things. On the left side, you see a carving of Shiva at the Kyun temple in Guangzhou. On the right side, on the Kizil caves, there's a Brahmin named Drona sharing the relics, Buddhist relics, with kings. So you can see that the fact that there is a Brahmin sitting there with some Buddhist kings and things like that. This Chinese man is actually at the Devi shrine here in Chedian in China as well. You can see the Chinese deities on the outside and the Hindu deities in the inside with the agarbatis, the incense sticks. This is the Narasimha temple on the bottom right side in the Kayu in Guangzhou as well. The same temple I showed you on the top left this is the Kyun temple in Guangzhou. Again, there's a video, but because of lack of time, I can't really play it right for now. But you can check this out online as well on YouTube. So I've taken you guys through that, and this famous Shaolin temple, home of Kung Fu. It owes its origins to the kind of the Hindu Buddhist monk who came from southern part of India. His name was Buddhabhadra. He's known as Dhammo in China. and we'll talk about Kung Fu in a bit. Of course, like I said, it's connected to Kerala through the Kalaripayattu, which is known as the mother of all martial arts. So now, as we talked about the sphere of influence of Hindus, let's talk about some of the contributions that Hindus have done in various types of fields. First and foremost, we cannot start with any contributions of Hindus without talking about yoga. So yoga, as you can see on the left side, was featured in Time magazine, and is connected discipline known as meditation, of course. But yoga philosophy is pervading vast sections. Whether you look at Patanjali, whether you look at Bhagavad Gita, whether you look at Mahabharata, any types of places, you find the word yoga. It's one of the 6 philosophical schools, Shaddarshanas, of classical Hindu philosophy. Connected with that, the pranayama practices that many people follow, the asanas. So these are all the different types of if you look at the 8 limbs, the Ashtanga yoga practice given by the Patanjali, the asanas and pranayams follow those procedures. So the yoga itself is a system. I think someone is not muted. If you can kindly mute them. So yoga itself is a system that was developed by the Hindu tradition. That doesn't mean it's only Hindus. There was, of course, Buddhist influence and Jain influence too. But the Hindu tradition has the most amount of systematized practices as far as yoga is concerned. And if you look at where the names of the Sanskrit names of different types of 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, Shiva is considered yoga, Adi Yogi, Sri Krishna is considered yoga, Yogeshwara. There's so many different types of connections of yoga, and yoga has now become sort of like global, right? And I'm going to show you some statistics. The influence of yoga naturally came to the West through various types of Hindu saints. So whether it's Swami Vivekananda, Paramhams Yogananda, Swami Shivananda, Prabhupada, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, B.K.S. Iyengar, Pattabhi Jois, Sri Ravi Shankar, Sadhguru, all of these great sages and saints have influenced the popularity of yoga in the Western world. Some quick information. In 2015, International Day of Yoga was declared by 177 nations that co-sponsored the UN resolution. Over 50 million Americans practice yoga on a daily basis, and I'm sure there's a large number in Canada as well. In America, we spend about $20 billion a year on yoga-related products. 75 to 85% of health clubs in America offer yoga classes. In 2010, the National Institute of Health gave a 16 million grant. It was one of the major first steps to do the real research on yoga and alternative medicine. Again, this is only Western scientific acceptance. Okay, so it's nothing to do. We had already accepted all these things, but every so often people say, well, what about some Western influence? Well, here's a statistic. If you do a Google search on the word yoga, you get 2.5 billion hits, and many yoga teachers make over $100,000 teaching yoga every year. Related science to that is Ayurveda. This is the science of life and longevity. This has had a powerful influence across the board, whether it's commercial products or wellness therapies and things like that. It can actually be documented all the way to 1000 BCE with Hindu sage Dhanvantari. We'll talk about Charaka and Sushruta in a bit. They played pivotal roles in systematizing and creating like various types of documents and treatises on Ayurveda itself. It also formed the basis of Tibetan medicine. It has an influence even on some of the Chinese medicine or medical practices, but specifically Tibetan medicine. In the Arab world, Ayurveda became popular around 8th century AD. Okay, so there was a physician actually who practiced in Baghdad, in Iraq, in 8th century AD. Okay, so the influence through the Arabs of the Hindu thought process in the Middle East goes way back. They, of course, transmitted Ayurvedic remedies and surgical techniques to Europe. And that's how some of the things like plastic surgery and things came about in the Western world. In the United States, we have a brand called Aveda. Aveda actually, unfortunately, the name actually means disknowledge or non-knowledge. But Aveda sells Ayurvedic products. It has become a very big commercial industry. On the left side, you can see at the bottom, you can have a turmeric latte. This has become a sort of like a important fad or fashion, I guess you want to call it nowadays, where people drink lattes with turmeric. I found this in San Francisco. It was about $30. $7. And I was shocked to see that a turmeric latte can cost $7 when my grandmother used to teach me how to make this thing from milk at home. So turmeric and other spices naturally have a lot of anti-inflammatory effects, antibacterial effects. If you go to Costco's and big supermarkets and things like that, you will find ashwagandha pills and turmeric pills and so many of these pills now that are widely available thanks to Ayurveda. Let's talk about Charaka. Charaka was one of the most influential people as far as Ayurveda is concerned. He lived around 800 BC. His name is called Charaka, which means someone who moves around from places to places treating people. His Charaka Samhita is the most important authentic work that is even followed today, by the way. As I mentioned to you, this was translated into Arabic and Latin all the way up in 8th century AD. It contains 120 chapters. It describes 149 diseases, 341 plants and products, 174 animals, products, 64 minerals, so many different things, different rejuvenation therapies that are described to prevent aging, how to recover from their convalescent state. One of the cool things that I found was there's a description of an air conditioning of houses, okay? How to cool your house in summer and how to heat your house in winter, okay? Because India does get cold and stuff, and this was actually then carried on to other places in the world. He also theorized that the human body is made of innumerable cells. This is really amazing that someone talking about this science in 800 BC. Another person that had a big influence was Sushruta. He's known as the father of surgery. His Shalya Tantra was the main treatise. He had, Ayurveda obviously is one of the 8 branches, but the art of surgery became one of the most recognized sort of treatises of that time. He practiced around 800 to 600 BCE, around Charaka or maybe before that or so. The Sushruta Samhita was then now known today. People know as the most important treatise on surgery as far as he's concerned. It describes more than 1,100 diseases, hundreds of medicinal plants. He worked with many types of surgical instruments. Okay, so there's 125 types of surgical instruments. So all the doctors who are, or aspiring doctors that are listening to this today, it's cool to understand that he described 125 kinds of surgical instruments. There's a huge list of things that he did. He also defined various types of stitching. So he used horse's hair, fine threads, fibers, goat's gut, ant's head, different things to do stitching. Okay, and 300 operations and 42 surgical processes have been defined in Sushruta Samhita, including 8 types of surgery. Here's Columbia University. So I found this thing very interesting that they actually talked about ancient Indian nose jobs and the origins of plastic surgery. So if you go to Columbia University's website, they actually have this. And they said that during the 6th century BC, an Indian physician named Sushruta, widely regarded in India as the father of surgery, wrote one of the earliest works of medicine and surgery. The Sushruta Samhita documented the etiology of more than 1,100 diseases, the use of hundreds of medicinal plants, and instructions for performing scores of surgical procedures, including 3 types of skin grafts and reconstruction of the nose. So you can see premier institution like Columbia also recognizing something like this. We can't talk about this without math. Many Hindus are really proud of the mathematical achievements of ancient Hindus. Albert Einstein, when he described Indian astrology, he said that Indian astrology is a science in itself and contains an illuminating body of knowledge. It taught me many things, and I'm greatly indebted to it. And many people know about Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta. Aryabhatta calculated the value of pi. In the United States, we celebrate Pi Day around March, middle of March. I think it's a worldwide day, but most people don't talk about Aryabhatta. He calculated the value of pi. Same thing with Bodhana Sulba and Aryabhatiyam. They acknowledged, this was actually acknowledged by Arab mathematicians. Okay, so when the Arabs learned math from Hindus, they acknowledged a lot of these things. And then Aryabhatiyam, which was the treatise of Aryabhatta, was translated into Latin in 13th century. But before this, it was around 8th century. You can see 8th century becoming a theme. Between 7th and 8th century, there was a lot of influence going of Hindu thought process onto the Arabic world. There are other groups like other works like Brahmagupta who translated that were translated again in 8th century. They talk about zero, the decimal system, intermediate equations. There's a Pandit named Kanka who actually took his book to a caliph in, again, 8th century AD as well. There's a person by the name of Professor Alok Kumar. He has written a book called Sciences of the Ancient Hindus. He's a professor out of a university in New York, upstate New York. You should read that, Sciences of the Ancient Hindus. He talks about how Arab thought process was influenced by Hindu thought process as far as math is concerned and other types of science is concerned. So his student, okay, was Al-Khwarizmi. He developed algebra. So many people know the word algebra comes from a person named Al-Jabr, but it actually goes back all the way to the Hindu roots. And in the word, in that tradition, they referred to this work. Anyone who was an engineer or mathematician was referred to as Hinsa. Okay, so Hind, as we all know, is a word for the land of the Hindus. Within the Hindu tradition, numbers larger than a trillion have been mentioned in the Vedas. Some of the concepts like shunya and kam even predate zero, right? So we know that zero was discovered by the Hindus, but the original words are things like shunya and things like. So there's a lot of deep philosophical things behind this, and I'll talk about someone who was very influenced by this in a bit. There was the introduction of zero was a key changing moment for the Roman numeral system, because it was not going forward along with negative numbers, right? So both zero and negative numbers created a very more complete numerical system. We talked about algebra, but there was also advances in trigonometry, and I'll show you that in a bit. Here's trigonometry. So the Kerala School of Astronomy, you should all be proud of the achievements of Kerala in general, or the population in that area in astronomy, math, and martial arts, etc. So the Kerala School of Astronomy, which was started by Madhava of Sangamgram between 13 and 1400 AD, was the first to develop the infinite series. And of course, calculus, trigonometry, geometry, algebra had a lot of influence through Madhava school. Okay, and there's a text called Yukti Bhasha. This outlines the infinite series. So the sine, cosine, tangent, arctangent, etc. And you can see on the right side the explanation of the sine rule in Yukti Bhasha itself, and you can see the actual words being used there too. So this is a artistic description, but basically there's an actual Sanskrit quote, which I don't have right now, but essentially this, if you look at the two equations on the left side, they were actually described in Yukti Bhasha. This school actually had a big influence specifically on Europe and Middle East, as we mentioned, 8th century and other times. Two important personalities that are not talked about quite a bit. I'll talk about three in a sec. But Srinivas Ramanuja, one of the greatest mathematicians. If you look at the right side, that big poster, this movie called The Man Who Knew Infinity was developed by Hollywood to describe the life of Srinivas Ramanuja. If you haven't seen this movie, please do see it. It's very nicely made. Then there was another gentleman whose name was Satyendranath Bose. He lived from 1894 to 1974. He actually worked with Einstein to develop the Bose-Einstein condensate. And if you know what the God particle discovery was, which is called the Higgs boson particle, that boson part is his name. Okay, unfortunately, that article, when they talk about Higgs boson, his name is often de-emphasized. He was never awarded the Nobel Prize. So you can see there's some kind of unfortunate discrimination when it comes to Hindu scientists who were never awarded some of these big, in spite of their contributions, never awarded the Nobel Prize. But fun fact for everybody, the first human computer was Shakuntala Devi. There's also a Bollywood movie made about Shakuntala Devi ji. She holds an undisputed place in the Guinness Book of Records for multiplying in the year 1980, okay, in the year 1980, two randomly chosen 13-digit numbers and giving a correct answer in 28 seconds. Astronomy and geography was known as Khagola Shastra. Astronomy is one of the 6 Vedangas. Many of the, again, back to the whole idea that Middle East was influenced by such things. So there's a Brahmasputra Siddhanta, which was known as Sindh Hind, was then translated into the Middle Eastern works, like Arabic works. There's a guy named Yaqub bin Tariq who wrote Tariq al-Aflaq using these principles from this particular text. Similarly, Al-Biruni in 1030 AD uses the materials from Aryabhatiam, which we talked about earlier, of Aryabhatta. He also translated the Surya Siddhanta. Surya Siddhanta is another very important doctrine from Varamihira, who lived around 505 AD as well. So there's a lot of this idea. One of the things that I really found cool was the idea of rotation of Earth. As I mentioned to you in the quiz earlier, that the theory of the rotation of Earth was actually conceptualized in ancient India, as you can see here. Here's Brahmagupta in 7th century. He talks about gravity. Bodies fall towards the earth as it is the nature of the earth to attract bodies, just as it is the nature of the water to follow. So again, this was all written in Sanskrit, but 7th century AD, okay? This is like 1400 years ago. Okay. And we can think about how this influence went on to the Middle East and then into Europe. So many of the things that we may not be aware of, trace it back. So if you ever go to India, two things you want to check out: the Sun Temple at Konark, beautifully developed using astronomical concepts, ancient architecture, things like that. And then the Sun Temple, the sundial, the Jantar Mantar, or the sundial, which was developed in 1725, around 1725 in Jaipur, is the world's largest sundial. Many of you may know about these diamonds called the Hope Diamond, the Kohinoor Diamond, things like that. But in India was the sole source of diamonds till the 1700s. And if you ever go to New Delhi, there's an iron pillar that has been around for 1600 years and it's basically rust-free. Okay, so Hindus had the tremendous contributions in metallurgy and gem sciences. It goes all the way back to the ancient Vedic traditions that talks about various types of metals, the impact of those metals, metallurgical techniques, gems on your human body, in medicinal properties. Various types of physicians use these in very small quantities to provide for medicinal purposes. They knew to use small quantities versus large quantities, because larger quantities may become poison, but smaller quantities can actually cure things. India, as I had mentioned to you earlier, India was the largest source of silver and zinc till very recently, right? The Zawar mines in Rajasthan, as I mentioned to you. Both silver and zinc were considered sacred metals. You find that in Hindu ceremonies in many different ways, especially silver and gold. Romans imported copper and brass, the city called Periplus, 2,000 years ago from the Hindus. The Greeks have recorded, dating back to 5th century BC, importing steel by Ethiopia, Persia, Greece, etc. from India. The British actually used iron swords from India, used iron from India because of its superiority. What's really interesting to me that I found was some of the iron was used in construction back in Great Britain as well. But one of the things that I found very cool was this idea of wood steel. Okay, this sword that ancient Hindus used to make is a very special one, and it'll be like it has with these designs. And the British tried so hard to replicate these things, but it did not work. So the woods, which was a very special kind of steel, was known. Again, it was known as Damascus steel, but again, it was originally produced in India. I mean, there are so many different examples of the metallurgical aspects. And of course, people know that India was rich in diamonds and gold and things like that. The two big diamonds that you see, Kohinoor diamond and Hope diamond, do come from India. Martial arts, we talked about that, but briefly again, just to mention this, it originated in Kerala. It was transmitted by this monk called Buddhabhadra. You can see his picture on the top right side. He actually took this art back to China and established. And when he went to the Shaolin Temple, that's where he saw monks being weak. So he started to train them in this art of Kalripayattu, which then became Kung Fu. Kung Fu would then influence judo, karate, jujitsu, so many different types of martial arts that we know today as only Chinese or Japanese, but they owe their origin to India. If you go to the Shaolin Temple, you will find some very cool things. Pretty much everybody is vegetarian there. The patron saint of Shaolin Temple was originally called Narayana, which was named after a bodhisattva. His name was Vajrapani. The mantra there is called Om Vajrapani Hum. So again, the Hindu-Buddhist influence there. This art is not lost. It's actually making a comeback. So Kalripayattu is still practiced in India, of course in Kerala, but around the world. Some of the Bollywood celebrities actually are trained in Kalripayattu. Even Westerners are coming to India to learn this ancient art. On the bottom right side, you could see an old lady, one of the experts in Kalripayattu. She's about 80 years old, okay? And she's got national trophies practicing this art. So this art is very, very popular of course, in Kerala, but also making a comeback in many other parts of India, but also at the world stage. I went to Ripley's Believe It or Not. If you ever go to New York City, check out Ripley's Believe It or Not. There's a section on India, and I found these really two cool weapons that show the martial arts prowess of India. One of the weapons you can see on the left side is called a Chakram. Okay, it's called a fatal frisbee, as they put it. It's written there: when skillfully thrown, this ancient Indian weapon can readily slice off a man's head from 150 feet away. With its razor-sharp aerodynamic design, the victim neither sees it or hears it coming. Now, this may remind you of what? This reminds you of Sudarshan Chakra, right? If you think about Krishna's chakra, how powerful it was and the impact that it had, how it severed someone's head. This technology reminds you of that kind of mention in the Mahabharata itself. So a very interesting thing that you can find in the Ripley's Believe It or Not museum. So I thought that was something cool to share. But beyond the kind of the material aspects, one of the things that I want to kind of also sort of start to leave people with is the idea of spiritual and philosophical concepts that have a deep influence in today's world. And I will see why this is relevant. First of all, Hindu Dharma and to an extent Buddha Dharma are the only traditions that have a feminine theology. So God is also a goddess. So God can be considered female. Some spiritual leader actually had said that if God ever had to take a form, he would really be a she, because only mothers have the power to conceive, right? So the feminine theology has had a big influence on Western feminine movements and so many other things around the world. The concept of karma and rebirth, right? Karma is officially included in the dictionary, and people use this as a very common word. I have bad karma and this and that. But the idea of karma comes from the Hindu Buddhist tradition. And the whole concept of rebirth, right? When you are born, you also die, and you kind of go through the cycle of birth and rebirth. Then the concept of ahimsa, right? This influenced the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain thought process of ahimsa influenced famous movements like the Satyagraha movement by Mahatma Gandhi, which then was adopted by Martin Luther King Jr. to start the civil rights movement in the United States. And that had an influence on Nelson Mandela. So many different places around the world adopted this idea of ahimsa. And then finally, vegetarianism, right? Many people don't realize how important vegetarian. Nowadays, people don't use the word vegetarianism. They use either plant-based diet or things like that. But again, this is a philosophy that is deeply embedded in the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. And it comes from the love for animals, love for the earth, and respect for the earth, right? Fun facts, 10% or more of Californians are actually vegetarians. Some of the vegetarian populations around the world, US has about 3.2, about probably 4 or more % now of vegetarians. The UK has about 7 to 10%. Brazil, interestingly, has 15 million vegetarians. And Italy, which is a heavy meat-eating country, also has one of the first European cities that is purely vegetarian, has about 4.2 million people in the country as vegetarians. Finally, one of the things that I would like to leave people with is this idea of human diversity and pluralism. These are lessons that we learn. We can talk about history, we can talk about everything else around the world, but what about something that can be relevant today? Okay. Hindu Dharma provides this idea of mutual respect and pluralism, respecting diverse philosophies, different modes of worships, different social customs. This has been part of our DNA for thousands and thousands of years. This is inbuilt into our traditions. You can see that being reflected in some of the quotes. Truth is one, the wise speak of it in many ways. May we receive noble thoughts from all directions. One does not become inferior by following another dharma, because we see virtuous humans in other dharmas as well. So our tradition has offered this idea that we can all live together peacefully in a coexist in this world without disputes, provided that we respect each other, we appreciate the diversity. Our disputes, when they were religious, were solved by a process called Shastrartha. We didn't go out and murder people or kill people or convert people, things like that. But we had healthy discussions and debates. And I think today's interfaith dialogues, are just a very recent phenomenon. But we used to have these Shastrarthas for so long. And this idea of tolerance is not enough. We need to make sure that we can think about acceptance and respect versus tolerance. Because, if you go and tell your friend, I tolerate you, if you go tell your wife that, hey, I'm going to tolerate you, if you tell your husband, I'm going to tolerate you, or your brother or sister, whoever, that word itself will say that the day I don't have to tolerate you, I'm just going to leave you, or I'm going to try to do something else. So our idea is mutual respect and pluralism. We have provided refuge to Jews, to Zoroastrians, Tibetans, Muslims, all types of people have come to the land of India or Bharat to escape persecution. And the Hindus have embraced them and provide them a home because we believe in this idea of mutual respect and pluralism. We don't have any traditions of religious terrorisms or inquisitions, persecution of any heretics. People can actually follow more than one, right? Sometimes people in a Hindu household, in the temple, right, in the Guru Appan temple, you don't have only one murti. You have several different murtis. You may have a primary Murti, of course, but you respect different types of modes of worship. Even in some Hindu traditions, there is even no Murti Puja, right? So the whole idea is that we have such a vast way of pluralistic thought that can be very relevant today, because this worldview can help solve religious conflicts, solve differences in today's world that is ripe with different types of issues going on. As globalization happens, as you all grow up from being children to adults, this is something that we can carry, that our tradition offers this idea of diversity, pluralism, mutual respect. That doesn't mean we don't have differences. We respect differences. We can't all be one, because look at nature. Nature is diverse. Nature has so many different things going on. One hand is not the same as the other hand. No two snowflakes are the same. So why would two people's belief systems may be the same? However, nature exists in harmony. So we should also exist in harmony. And that is a lesson, then one of the biggest contributions that our culture has provided to the world. So with that, I would like to stop, I think. And I want to thank you all for listening to me for the past about 45, 50 minutes. And I will take some questions or any comments that people may have.
Wow, thank you so much, Nikunj ji. That was an amazing talk. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here that this has, opened our eyes to all the influences of Hinduism worldwide. And, it's changed my perspective for sure. So thank you so much for that. We do have a few questions in our chat that I can ask at this time. Our first question, someone's wondering about, how do we make our amazing heritage and contributions like a common knowledge, taking out the politics and of the history, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great point, and that's what I'm trying to do here, right? Just give me 1 second. My battery is running low, so I just need to plug in. 1 second. But yes, I mean, just to talk about it, I think this is the reason why I created this presentation, right? There's no discussion of politics here. There's no discussion of anything, quote unquote, controversial. It's pure facts, and facts don't lie. So let's take something like this. And I encourage all of you, if you are interested, you can join and help me create infographics, really cool infographics that can be shared with people about these contributions, right? I'm only one person. I can train you all to give this presentation. If you want to give this presentation amongst your circles, your friends, think about libraries, okay? One of the biggest ways to influence people is through the libraries. So if we can create such materials and provide that in libraries, that would be a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, great answer. We also had a question specific to the presentation where, is there any reasons why, some murtis might be worshipped more in some countries versus others? Like, I think you were saying Bhagwan Shiva was in Vietnam versus, other countries.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the amazing part of it, right? That, as I mentioned, the diversity of the Hindu thought process, that it just attracts different people, right? So whoever went, so if a particular kingdom, let's say the Cholas or the Pandyas or the all the different types of people went to different countries and different continents, they carried their particular traditions, right? So, for example, the Cholas, where we all know they were very much of a Shiva Bhakt, right? So they worship Bhagwan Shiva. So when they went to southern China, or when they went to other parts of, let's say, Southeast Asia, right? They carried the Shiva Bhakti with them. So that influence was naturally there. Similarly, some of the others were Vishnu traditions. That's one thing, right? There were also merchants. So many merchants carried their own modes of worship to these places. So whoever was attracted to that, a lot of times one king would be attracted to one particular tradition, okay? And that king would then adopt a Vaishnava tradition or a Shaiva tradition, etc. And then that would make a big influence, right? So whether you look at Japan or China, you will have a particular king really fascinated. Same thing with Buddha Dharma, right? A particular king would be fascinated by the Buddha Dharma and then adopt Buddha Dharma. Another king, his own son, would then come back to the Vaishnava tradition and then adopt Vaishnava tradition, then back to the... So there's this constant back and forth because that was the nature. That is the nature of the Hindu thought process. In my own home, right? I'm a Hanuman Bhakta, but in my entire, mandir, I have Shiva, I have Hanuman, I have Devi, I have Rama, right? Ganesha, of course. So we have this pluralistic idea that Bhagavan is in all these amazing things. Someday I feel like Bhagavan is everywhere, right? So that's the idea that's the influence. So it's not one particular influence, it's many different types of influences.
Again, a great answer. I know, like you were saying earlier in your talk, that even if you go to a temple, like there's one God, but there's also like various other sub gods there too. So the freedom that we're given to, worship anyone is amazing.
Yeah, anyone or no one.
Or no.
You don't have to worship anybody. You can just say Aham Brahmasmi and be done with it, right? And that's the whole idea, that Bhagavan resides in me. I don't have to do anything. I'll just do yoga and go inside and just focus on that.
That's true. Our next question is wondering, could you share your thoughts on the appropriation of Hindu culture and traditions on like pop culture, media? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate and sometimes quite sad. And the reason, what's interesting to me, and I've been studying this idea of cultural appropriation for many years, right? And there are many different aspects here. So I want to share a few. So first one is many people love the art of Hindus, okay? Our culture is so artistically beautiful, right? Many colors, many designs, many patterns, many deities that look really amazing, right? And so for an artist, right, forget about the malice part, which I'll come to in a bit. Just from a pure art perspective, it's so beautiful, right? When you compare that to the Western world, it seems very plain, right? So our culture looks so vibrant, so artistic that people naturally are drawn. If you're a true artist, you're naturally drawn to that, whether it's music or paintings and murtis and different things, right? The second aspect, so that's why like you see people just adopting it without understanding that, hey, this is connected to a culture. The second aspect is malice. Malice meaning some people have an intense disdain or unfortunately like some sort of a hatred or bigotry against Hindus because they consider us like as false, false religion or false worshippers or something. And they want to try to, sort of misappropriate these and saying, oh, well, these are all false gods anyway, so let's use them for either sort of commercial purposes they could care less about. So when you put like Ganesha on beer bottles or put them on doormats or, bathroom, like toilet seats and things like that, for them, it's like, it doesn't matter, right? And and then the third aspect is, so you have that malice where some people think you're a false religion, you don't deserve the right to exist. Unfortunately, that is not acceptable, and we should be, against that, no doubt about it. Then the third aspect is just cheap commercialization, because like I said, art sells, cool things sell, right? So you just put it on a t-shirt, put it on a toilet paper, put it on a doormat, put it on a bikini, whatever it is, it just sells. So people like this exotic idea of, so there's this Western universalism idea that, whatever we do is okay. We can use ancient indigenous cultures whichever way we want. And doesn't matter, right? But the thing that I would say for everybody is that we need to say it's not okay. Okay. And we need to make sure that we say it vocally, financially, and politically. Meaning, when I say politically, it's not going into politics, but the point is voice it to your representatives. Right? When you have a local elected official, you should go and talk to them and say, hey, look, this happens in our community. We would like you to be aware of this, and we would like you to help us in some ways. And so by doing that type of awareness, it brings this issue in front. And for all these years, remember, India as a civilization, I'm not going to talk about just as a country, but as a civilization only became free officially in 1947, right? So before that, many of the things have been misappropriated, taken away. The entire narrative of the Hindu tradition was being set by the conquerors, by the colonizers, right? So only recently we've started to have, and Hindus have now gotten some financial power around the world, some political power, etc. So starting to influence that thought process. So it's very important for us to understand that in order for us to fight cultural appropriation, and one of the biggest ones, if you think about it, is the swastika, okay? Many people think that Hitler used the word swastika. He never used it. And you can check out, if you go to kona.org/swastika, you will find a lot of information on this. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's not appropriation. It was just misattribution. A symbol that is used by a hate mongerer was connected to our symbol. But the Western world just said, hey, that looks similar. That looks similar. It's all the same. Let's just take it, right? And so that's the problem we face. But now Hindus are starting to talk about it. We are starting to fight back in a sense that, hey, we want to provide more education to people. So I think that's the right way to go about doing it. Don't take it for granted. If you see something, say something in that sense.
Thank you for that. And I know we're at time, but we do have a few more questions if that's okay with you.
No problem. Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Our next couple of questions also kind of relate to what you were saying about speaking up and saying something. Someone was asking, in the age of activism and social media, can cancel the culture, it's important to recognize the difference between stewardship versus ownership. What can our young people do to help us understand and enable them to become responsible Hindus?
Well, those are very important words. Well, a couple of things, right? Yes, in the age of social media, it's very important that you be responsible. But I've always said you have to be respectful. You know, don't disparage others, but be respectful, but you also stand up for yourself, right? That's what Gandhi has taught, right? You have to, when you have the Satyagraha movement, people thought that Gandhi was weak. He should have picked up weapons. Well, you know, there are debates on that. But let's say, for example, it takes a lot of courage to stand up and fight for justice, okay? So we have to stand up and fight for what's ours. If you look at I mean, you guys are in Canada, there's a big movement in the indigenous population going on right now to understand what happened to them, to you know, of course, Canada apologizing for that, but at the same time, providing that voice to the indigenous communities. The Hindus have not gotten that voice, okay? Whether it's across the world, but especially from the decolonizing perspective. So it's very important that we own that dialogue. You know, if we don't own that dialogue, somebody else is going to own that dialogue. So, but that doesn't mean we have to disrespect anybody. That's not the idea here. But if somebody has a problem with me, if I'm saying I'm Hindu and somebody says that's disrespectful, well, that's a problem, because then my entire identity is disrespecting you in that sense. And that's not really acceptable. So Hindus have always been that pluralistic. So we respect various traditions, even though we may disagree or agree, even within the Hindu tradition, we respect. But that doesn't mean it's only a one-way street. Respect comes both ways. It's called mutual respect. Mutual has two different parties in it, not one respect, okay? So we also deserve respect. Our traditions and our culture deserves respect. So when you're talking about this in social media, we have to make sure that we take that stance in a respectful manner, okay? If we're not disparaging other people don't have the right to disparage us. It's a simple equation for me. And also, being a responsible Hindu means you need to understand your culture first. And it's not just about young people. You know, a lot of times I find on these groups and stuff like, oh, what about young people? Young people will do what they need to do. Old people also need to do their job, okay? It's the old people not doing the job sometimes, like parents who may then end up not teaching the young people. So how do you expect the young people? I give this example to someone. I was running a class, and you know, what's really interesting to me is, like, I was running this class, and parents, this was a few years ago, parents would literally just leave their kids and go, okay? And I told all those parents, a small class, some of my friends as well, I told them, folks, I am not your babysitter, okay? I am teaching these students, but I expect you as parents to do the heavier lifting. They're only here for 1 hour. They are with you like 80–90% of the time. And of course, as they grow older, they won't be. But the point is, if you're not going to teach them, somebody else is going to teach them something else. I can only unbrainwash for an hour or teach them the right things for 1 hour. The rest is your responsibility. So please don't put it on the youth only. It's really the adult's responsibility. It's a partnership between the adult and the youth. The youth need to learn and be empowered, but at the same time, they need to be also supported by the community, by the adults, saying that it's okay. This is our tradition. Don't be shy of it. Don't whitewash it. Be proud of who you are.
Amazing answer. And I think we have another question just chiming in on that. You know, we have a lot of young people who are proud of our heritage, but sometimes, you know, they might be shy or they might be feared in some way. And they might not be able to view their ideas and thoughts on stage within the community. So again, like, if you have any thoughts on what you would think can be bring forth to help
Absolutely.
them learn about their history.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I will tell you, knowledge is empowerment. Okay, I used to be a shy person, believe me. When I came from India, when I was 15 years old, I was a very shy person in that sense that I didn't want to. It was I came to a Western country, different like styles of things. But one of the things that really empowered me was the knowledge of the Hindu tradition, and I joined Hindu Students Council. So support network is very important, because individually youth may feel, oh man, you know, I'm the only one doing this, or, you know, my friends are saying this or that. But when you become part of a community, it changes you. Okay. So for me, being part of Hindu Students Council really changed me. And I encourage all the young people here to join HSC, whether you're in high school or in college, because that really creates that support network. Anytime you have an issue, whether it's in school or outside, you have at least a few people that you can talk to who understand where you're coming from. They have faced the same issues. They are facing the same issues, but they are collectively working on the answer. If you're not going to be part of any support networks, no matter what you do, no matter how much you do it, you're always going to feel like you're alone. So don't feel like you're alone. There's a lot of people out there who are just like you. Anytime you have a question, you can also come to me. I don't have an issue with that.
Thank you so much for that. We do have another question in terms of like the writing done in India. So for example, many historians and writers in India have ignored the immeasurable contributions of India to the world. So is there any way we can correct this injustice?
Yes. I have a great example of this because I was in 10th grade and I came here to the US. So before the 10th grade, I had learned history from a colonized lens, let's put it this way. So India itself needs to decolonize. The departments will be decolonizing slowly and slowly, but I think two things are really important. I think the Western Hindus, whether they are Indian origin Hindus or non-Indian origin Hindus, can play a very important role in today's age of social media and sort of like wide scale availability. Like today, what we're doing today, right? This program is broadcasted live on Facebook. We can convert this into a YouTube and you can put it on the GTOB YouTube channel, right? So it'll be readily available out there so people can take that. Similarly, we can create infographics. So while the Indian government works at their own pace, which they are also working on some things, there are a lot of internal dynamics and social challenges and political challenges in India. So, it's very hard for me to give you an answer in 30 seconds because there's a lot of complex things going on, but what can we do? So as Western Hindus who are sitting over here on this side of the world, no one's stopping us. No one has told you, you can't do this, right? No one's putting you in jail for doing this. You do it. You go and give the presentation, create the infographics, create these resources, share them with people. That's the best way to empower many, many people. Instagram, for example, has become a big, and TikTok, both Instagram and TikTok. Imagine if we can create videos, short snippets, reels, etc., on Instagram and TikTok. A lot of kids will really like that.
Great answer. I think we just have one other question, and they're wondering, do you have any thoughts on Hindus moving further away from their culture and their traditions? What's your take on that?
I mean, I don't like it. So that's my take on it. But you have to understand the symptoms behind it, right? So when someone is sick, right, what do? You go to the doctor, and what does the doctor do? The first thing they do is take your blood pressure, check your temperature, ask you a series of questions, okay? Now, I'm not gonna say that we have to do diagnostics on everybody, but the point is we need to understand what is going on, why someone is shying away. And the reasons are because they don't have the resources available for them to understand the real beauty, right? Like we talked about so many of them today. Second thing is there's no support system. Like I said, unfortunately, many parents have this idea that I can just drop off a kid to a temple for an hour and somehow he or she will be magically transformed into the most proud Hindu you can ever find, okay? That's the worst mythology you can follow. So please get rid of that misconception. Your job is to do that, not the temple's job or any Bal Vihar job, etc. They're just adding to what you're teaching them, number one. Number two. Number three is I think that parents need to deal with tougher questions. A lot of times there are questions around caste, questions around LGBTQ, questions around Hindu-Muslim conflicts. Many of these questions, they're brushed aside and they're sort of put under the rug saying, beta, don't worry, just go and do your math. Just focus on your exams. Don't worry about these things. They will go away. Well, guess what? That creates a vacuum in the heads of people. And that vacuum is then filled by other things because they'll go and do research. They'll do a Google search and they'll find other things. So it's very important for us to engage. If we don't engage on these controversial topics or topics that have misconceptions, we're not going to be able to empower with the right people. Every religion, every culture has some controversial elements in there that sometimes are not understood. Other religious groups have developed mechanisms to cope with those or counter those or address them or challenge them, whatever it is. Hindus, unfortunately, don't have those mechanisms in the way we should. So I think we need to develop those mechanisms, have that conversation. Still, kids may shy away because what happens, there's a draw in the Western world, right? You'll celebrate Christmas more than you'll celebrate Diwali or, other types of different festivals. Because there's a wider acceptance of that. But if you make it more fun, like one of the things that we have done in our community here, literally, I live in a community where there's a lot of Hindus. During Diwali, we actually, in New Jersey, the fireworks are legal. So we go out on the street in one of the cul-de-sacs and really buy like $1,000+ of fireworks and go crazy. Number one. Number two is we also dress up in Indian clothes, traditional clothes. We go to the temple together. We also make sure people have sweets and get some really, really good gifts. Okay. So that whole entire aspect of culture and religion and spiritualism or spirituality should be combined together to make things more applicable in today's world. And if people say, hey, I don't care about these things. Well, you can't change everybody, but if you provide that support network, if especially for students, if they see other cool, quote unquote, cool kids doing this stuff, right, they will do it. I know this because I'll tell you, I share this example, but when I came to the US, okay, I had an Indian accent. And one of the things that I actively did was to work on changing that, because in order for me to grow up here and to relate to young Hindus, the first thing that they did was they would look at me, my face, my style of talking, how do I deliver myself, right? I could say the greatest things in the world, but if they did not relate to me in their own face, shape, form, style, they would not listen to me. Okay, so we have to also, and Sri Krishna is a great example of this, right? Hanuman is a great example of it. Both of them were very, very strong from an oratory skills perspective. Their presentation, if you look at Sri Krishna, he never dresses ugly. Okay, he's always pretty, beautiful dressing, always nice, right? If our deities dress nice, they act nice, they can speak well, what is stopping us from doing the same? Okay, it sounds very like sort of selfish or like very shallow, but no. Look at Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna is dressed beautifully. He talks beautifully. His style of engaging in dialogue, if you read the Mahabharata or the Gita stuff, is very powerful. So let's learn from our culture and bring that to ourselves. Once you do that, you can influence a lot of people.
Thank you for that. We do have one final question, and I think that chimes in with what you were saying earlier about coming together as a community. So the question is, how do we build an international Hindu forum? Like, we do have a lot of Hindus internationally, especially those who have recently started to follow Hindu philosophy and scriptures. So how would we be able to give them a community in which they would feel that they belong and give them that support and knowledge?
So there is an ecosystem slowly being developed, right? Like we started Kona in 2020 as an advocacy organization, grassroots. So we want people who are, whether you're young or old, doesn't matter, to get involved and really take the dialogue, take the conversation about Hindu Dharma back to us and really work on issues impacting us, right? Similarly, Hindu Students Council is there. If you are a youth, you can get involved in that. So there's an ecosystem. There are social groups, there's temples, there are conversations going on. I think rather than creating one what's really interesting for me is for all the diversity that we have, we always want to create one organization. We can't do that. What we need to do is create an ecosystem, okay? Because Hindus by nature can't just have one organization. We're just not that group. But what we can do is create a harmonious ecosystem, a symbiotic ecosystem where, okay, adults can be supported by multiple groups. There could be multiple resources that can be shared, right? So some groups, it's like experts, right? The division of labor. So if there are experts in certain areas, they should be tapped in. Creating the ecosystem is really important. And I think a small ecosystem, at least in the North American sphere, is developing slowly and slowly. And even globally, now that we're all connected in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, I think that there should be some international conferences that bring Hindus together, but not just for chai pe charcha, like, not just like having tea and coffee and just chit-chatting, but actionable items. And when we have those actionable items, what ends up happening is you can then take them and say, okay, where does the knowledge system sit? Who has the knowledge? Who has some resources? How can we leverage them? Using resources from India, but also from outside, right? There are somebody at point, like, entrepreneurs. Yes, entrepreneurs are great. Hindu entrepreneurs across different aspects should be utilized to create some of these systems. There are really bright people in Canada, in the United States, young people who are very skilled to do that. So using their skill set. So creating that ecosystem more than one Hindu organization, because we're never going to have one Hindu organization. That's just not going to happen. That's not what Hindus are. Even Muslims, Christians, Jews, nobody has one organization. That's not human nature. But what other groups do have is an ecosystem that functions well, supports each other, things like that. So I think we should focus on building that ecosystem, which is happening slowly. But all of you are welcome to join that.
Thank you for that answer. And that's very true. Like, with our diversity, it's very hard to keep it in only one ecosystem. So I'm glad to hear that. We have so much acknowledgement from our community here, and we're so grateful to have you present to us. That was our last question. So, thank you so much, Nikunj ji. We're so blessed to have you. I would highly recommend everyone to check out Kona's website for more information. On behalf of the Guadapan Temple of Brampton, as well as the Yuvathma team, we'd like to thank you for your time today and your valuable information. To stay up to date for other similar amazing talks, please do check out the Yuvathma social media platform. Our Facebook handle is Yuvathma GTOB, and our Instagram is yuvathma.gtob. Again, thank you again, Nikunj ji. With a Shanti Mantra, I will conclude today's session. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.
Namaste.
For now.
Thank you for having me.
Namaste.